Assalamu alaikum, my name is Arfat and welcome to a brand new video. Thank you so much for following me and watching these videos. Hopefully it benefit everyone, and I learn a lot from the comment section of my videos when you guys commented and things like that. Today will be a completely different video I want to make, and this video is more like to clear my thoughts, to share with you my thoughts about certain or even random things about the New Testament, the Torah, and the Quran as well. The first things first that I'm trying to discuss in this video is to establish how old were Mary when she gave birth to Jesus. Okay, um, and if we look at the Quran and if we look at the New Testament, we can pretty much gauge that they're different in their age. And if we look at anthropological data that we have, a study of women in the past, at what age they gave birth to, and tie it with the cultural and social history, we do know that women die at a very young age in the past, and age like 15 or 14, 13 even, in the past, women are considered an adult. Okay, now if we use ancient standards. And so at what age then did Mary, the mother of Jesus, gave birth to Jesus? Okay, alayhi salam. I have a theory. This is just a theory because we do not have any concrete evidence. Okay? The New Testament indirectly imply, because of the word betrothed, okay, in the NRSV, that this word, even though it is so ambiguous, that you can have a lot of interpretation to it, which is what we have today. If we do have, again, even if we have concrete evidence that this is exactly what it is, people are still able to interpret it in many different ways, ironically. But for this part, the word betrothed here, it is quite ambiguous. We cannot apply modern understanding of the word betrothed to the past, okay? Because words do have meanings, and the meaning is tied down to the culture, the socio-political environment. Okay, and in the ancient world, obviously it is a completely different world. And so the word betrothed is very ambiguous. There are a couple of interpretations. It could be that Mary was a very young woman. Again, how young was very young? Probably 8, 9, 10, or 7 even. And so when we use the word betrothed here in the past, it could mean that Joseph has been assigned to her as a future spouse. Okay, that could be one way to look at things. The other way to look at things, from the if we look at the Quranic narrative, okay, again, this is also interpretation, okay, hermeneutics. Mary seems like a bit older than 9 years old, probably 15 or 14, even, although it allows that Mary could be younger than that. Okay, because remember, if you look at the Quran, she was taken care of by Zachariah. Okay, Zachariah had won the lot, and so he was entrusted to take care of Mary. And we do have the scene in the Quran whereby Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave providence, sustenance to Mary, which imply that she is a very young woman, okay, a very young girl, if we use modern language. but a very young woman if we use ancient language. Remember the age difference, we do need to take into consideration. So she could have probably been around 8 or 9 or 10 even. Okay. But she could also be 16, because remember she was dedicated to the service of the temple. Okay, because the mother of Mary wanted to have a male son, male child, but then Allah SWT gave her a woman child, because they were from the Levites. If we use the Israelites narrative, they were from the Levites clan, meaning the Levites were responsible for the temple services, and mostly these are done by men. Right? And so the mother of Mary wanted to have a male son so that she can dedicate this son to the services of the temple. Okay? That is the background story to it. If we use the Israelite narration, if we accept the New Testament, okay, using the understanding of the Torah, okay, the Old Testament, okay, the Hebrew Bible, okay, because this is how ancient Jewish family or Jewish clan or Jewish practices were in the past. Okay, E.P. Sanders wrote a very great book. It changes though, but then again, we can get into this another discussion. Okay, E.P. Sanders wrote a book regarding the practices of Jews around the time of Jesus, before, around the time of Jesus, and slightly later. Okay, again, forgot the book. Jesus, the Jewish law from a certain period to a certain period. I can't remember the date, but I recommend you to go look it up. E.P. Sanders. I forgot. I have it, but I should be more prepared. But I'll try and include the link in the description below. But if you Google, you probably know as well, Jewish law from a certain age, for a certain period to a certain period. Really, E.P. Sanders, again, you can only expect fantastic work from E.P. Sanders, especially his book on Paul. But anyway, I digress. So moving on back to the purpose of this video. One of the purpose of this video is to discuss the age of Mary. So if we look at the Quran, it can also mean that she is slightly later, probably 12, 13, 14 even. But because she is being dedicated to the services of the temple, meaning she cannot escape, right? She's a dedicated, she's been dedicated to the temple, and she is a loyal person. She is a very kind-hearted person, and things like that. And so it could be both. Okay, the reason why the narrative about Allah SWT gave her food or sustenance, it somehow implies that she is a young girl, okay, in modern language, or young woman. Okay, and so it could also be a slightly late older woman in the 16 or 15 or 17 years old, or it could even be older than that. Okay, but because we do not have concrete evidence, so we do have to take certain age, like range into consideration. Unless you like Christian tradition based on the New Testament, okay, quote unquote, is that Mary was a very, very young woman, and then Joseph the carpenter was a very, very old person. Okay, how far are you willing to accept this narrative? That completely belongs to you. But for me, I prefer to go by the Quranic narrative. Okay, although we do take the New Testament into consideration as well. Okay, but because we do not have complete concrete evidence, complete concrete evidence, not only based on the narrative, but also based on the manuscripts. Okay, so this is what we mean by complete concrete evidence. Um, because a lot of people were mistaken. They thought that we do have evidence, okay, because the New Testament says so. Well, the New Testament Gospels, the complete Gospels, were only found, okay, based on the extant manuscripts that we have today, Vaticanus and Sinaiticus, the complete New Testament. Okay, and if you talk about canon that we have, the current canon that we have, they're much later, much later down the years, even though it doesn't mean anything. Okay, because canon is just basically a compilation. Okay, but some scholars or some people actually argue that way, that okay, canon, the number of books determine the number of books in the New Testament. It determines the number of books that is also believed to be scripture. So if you look at some of the earlier canons, there's only 5, there's only 6, and much earlier on there wasn't even a canon to begin with in the first place. Okay, so only people believe around the time of Athanasius, Epiphanes, the Jerome. Okay, then we start to get more books in the canon, and so more books were believed to be authoritative scripture. Even until the Reformation, Luther wanted to throw out the book of James. Okay, and earlier on, Origen do not believe that the book of Hebrews were, a part of scripture, or were written by Paul at least. And so we do have people doubting, and these are not just quote unquote normal people, these are scholars, creme de la creme of the ancient scholars, okay, of the ancient Christian scholars. And they are saying the same thing, and as well as modern scholars are saying the same thing, even though in a more radical way, if you want to put it, because there are scholars out there who reject the entire New Testament, that every single stories. These are what we have called the ultra conservative skeptic. But we do have to allow that miracles happen if we want to engage in the study of religion in a much more constructive way. Because to engage in a study of religion, there must be certain premises that by default we need to accept, and one of them is prophecy. If you do not accept prophecy, then might as well you study something else other than religion. Even though we're using historiography, okay, historical method, modern interpretation, and modern historical methods, okay, or methods of interpretation of finding history, but this is a modern phenomenon. Who knows what will happen in the future? Okay, historical methods evolve, as we have seen from the past till today. But again, there are also certain pedigree that we must put into consideration. By the modern way of doing history is basically also the modern way of finding out what happened in the past, or who did this crime, for example, or who did what. Okay, and so even though methodology develops over time, it also evolved drastically, and it also sometimes take a 180-degree turn even. And so we do have to take things into consideration, that nothing is actually concrete. Okay, not even epistemology, because epistemology depends on which methodology you adopt. Because the different methodology you adopt, okay, you have a different epistemological thesis, because epistemology is a byproduct of the methodology that you adopt, obviously vice versa. And so, which is why we have different conclusions throughout history, as to who Jesus was or relationship of Jesus to his mother. It just so happens that we live in this modern time whereby we have all these technologies and things like that, whereby we can, for up to a certain extent, also based on the extant manuscripts that have been discovered, try and trace back, okay, and reconstruct history, because history is actually a reconstruction, because we do not have access to the past anymore. We can only reconstruct history based on the evidence, the extant evidence that we have. Now, I use the word extant evidence that we have here because there's a lot of historians who reconstruct history not based on extant evidence, but based on legends, word of mouth, even. Okay? Now, I do have to be specific in the extant language here, and by that I mean concrete, solid, physical evidence. It cannot be hearsay. This Fulan say this, Fulan say that, and so we just harmonize the data together. And then we have a history. No, that is not history, and that is not an honest way to do history as well. Okay, even though using modern historiographical method, we can also doubt that this is actually the real history, because technically we do not know. We do not have access to the past. Okay, but the methods that we have developed currently, I'm not saying that it is superior, okay, and I'm not even implying that it is inferior, but it is also one of the best methods that we have at the moment to try and uncover the rubble, okay, to uncover what happened in the past. Throughout the different ages, okay, they have their own best methods. Scholars of that era have devised their own best method to know about the past based on the evidence that they have. Okay, and so based on what they have, they work with it. And today, based on what we have to work with it. And in the future, as more evidence arise, the people that will come after us, they will work within their parameters. And so, if we look at Giza Vermes pointed this out, different ages we have different Jesus. So which Jesus it is? How will we know? Right? We will know which Jesus it is. The New Testament itself is a very interesting book, because it is not only a book about the life of Jesus, okay, biographies, call it whatever you want. Okay. It is also a book to tell us that at different periods of time, even they are we're not talking about centuries, but even between decades, like Mark to Matthew, it's probably about 15 years, 15, 20 years, depending on how far you want to go. But even within 2 decades or so, stories evolve. The Matthean community believed that this is what Jesus was. The Markan community believed that this is what Jesus was. The Lucan and Johannine community believed that this is what Jesus was. Today, this is what we believe about who Jesus was. During the Reformation, they believe they have their own theory, and in the future, we will find, if we do live that long, that scholars that will come after us will look at us and say that, oh, our Jesus is completely mistaken. We do have new evidence, and this is the Jesus that we are proposing. And so nothing is actually concrete, and it is actually absurd, even, I will use this language, absurd, for people to today claim that this is Jesus, the Jesus that we know. If only they look back into history, and they look at the writings, they look at the survey of Jesus through the centuries, through the millennium even, you will have different Jesus, and each period of time, okay, scholars of that particular era, they have came up with the best method to know who Jesus was. Okay? Because obviously these people were lovers of Jesus, and that is why they want to know about Jesus. No doubt, we do have a lot of exaggerative accounts that have uh, could not possibly be Jesus. Like for example, account that doesn't even have basis in the New Testament concrete evidence. Okay, that Jesus is God, and then he's also human. Okay, and the Trinity, three persons and one beings manifested in how you want to look at it. So this we can completely reject because this has no basis in the earliest evidence that we have even. But some people would actually propose that because we do not have extant manuscripts that date back what we call it, pre-Nicaea even, okay, depending on because Sinaiticus is probably the mid 4th century, so does Vaticanus, slightly later, but some people have dated it to early 4th century, around the time of Nicaea, and some even believe that the current Codex Sinaiticus that we have is one of the 50 quote unquote New Testament that was commissioned by Constantine. Okay, again, we don't even know about this, but the text of Sinaiticus is pretty much Antiochene, okay, Antiochene. Some people pronounce it Antiochene, some people pronounce it Antiochene. If you do not know what I'm talking about, then please look at my the text of the New Testament video that I've made, the different Alexandrian texts, the different texts, Antiochene texts, and things like that. But even though scholarship have moved away from that based on the latest research, but meaning what I meant by that is that scholarship no longer believe or that these textual families are the way to go. But people who are still reading Metzger's work today, Metzger's work has not been updated because he passed away, I believe, in 2005 or 2007. And so scholarship have in the past 15 years or so have moved, have distanced themselves from the Metzger's method, and more books have been produced. If you read modern survey, again, refer to my text of the New Testament books recommendation. I recommended books in the written by about 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and also just quite recently. And the scholarship have evolved, not drastically, but they do have evolved, and so does the if you read Raymond Brown's work, a lot of the stuff have been updated by modern introductory textbook in the New Testament. And the best one I can recommend today is Delbert Burkett's, which have been updated in 2020, and also the Bart Ehrman's introductory textbook, which last updated 2020 as well, and will continue to be updated. I believe 2024 is the next inauguration of that textbook. And so scholarship do evolve, and even if we look at the text of the New Testament, the study of the canon itself, it has evolved. Even if you look at the past 2 decades, it has evolved a lot. Okay, and moreover, if we look at the past, if we do a survey of the Jesus throughout the ages and the study of the New Testament throughout the ages, it has evolved drastically as well. Now, the study of the New Testament, there's a lot of disconnectivity, especially in the Dark Ages in Europe. Um, we do have these blossoming scholarships, okay, up until the advent of Islam, okay, and then Europe pretty much went into turmoil, and then Islam took over from this scholarship. They translated the Greek writings, they preserve it, even though libraries have been burned by Hulagu and also by Timur, but we still have a lot of these writings survive, and if it wasn't for the Muslims, a lot of these ancient manuscripts would have been gone. But we must also give thanks to the Manichaean Christians in Central Asia, because they also were actually the first one to translate this and brought it to and expose it to the Arab world, because they're basically great in their translation work. And the Abbasid Caliphate, the Caliph, they commissioned a lot of these people to do translation works, and that allows the study of philosophy, and it also influenced some people in the Arab, in the Muslim world as well. Pretty much around the 800s or so, the Central Asians dominated the Muslim Caliphate. After the Umayyads' demise in 750, Abdul Rahman, he ran and built up the Umayyad Emirates in Cordoba, okay, Muslim Spain, Portugal, based on the book by Hugh Kennedy. And so we do have this, Europe pretty much stopped with this. They focus on pretty much theology, and they stopped engaging in philosophy. When I say stop, I don't mean completely, but not to the extent whereby it picks up again in Enlightenment, as well as before the advent of Islam, whereby you have a lot of these church fathers. They were not only theologians par excellence, they were also philosophers. Okay, majority of them were Neoplatonists, and so they were also philosophers, and it influenced their theology. Okay? And this is why when the Muslim scholars in the Abbasid era dynasty, even when they find out about this, they vehemently oppose the use of falsafa, the use of philosophy to interpret scriptures, the Quran, because they have seen via example as to how the church fathers of the past, the patristic fathers, how they deviate in their theology, okay, when it comes to understanding the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, okay, God Almighty. And so that is why groups like Mu'tazila were all condemned, okay, by scholars in the Muslim dynasty. Pretty much a lot of things were happening in Egypt as well, in the Middle East, but a lot of these things were happening in Central Asia. Central Asian, they were shamanists to begin with, a mixture of Buddhism, but pretty much Buddhism were not eliminated by or decimated by Islam. A lot of these Buddhists, they converted to Christianity, and a lot of these Christians, they then converted to Islam as well. And so that has been the day ever since. A majority of Central Asians today, they're Muslims, okay, including the former Slavic countries even. They were all Muslims as well. Okay, obviously, the Crusades changes that. The Crusades. There are many Crusades, 8 Crusades happening throughout the history. Some would say even more minor Crusades and things like that. But the Crusades pretty much took back the lands that the Muslims have conquered earlier on. And then we have the Ottomans who conquered again Europe, but then towards the end of their reign, after Sulaiman, they drop again. Then the Mughal Empire and the Aurangzeb Alamgir were the hype spot. Okay, you want to say. Actually, during the Delhi Sultanate as well, a lot of because of the invasion of Tamerlane, a lot of these and earlier on by Genghis Khan, because Irchuk he slaughtered the Mongol delegation, um, again decimated the Khwarezmian Empire. When Genghis Khan came down, a lot of these towns were decimated. Khorasan were decimated, and pretty much no one was spared except for a few handful cities as well. But pretty much millions of people died. So that was a very tragic part of our history as a Muslim. But then again, we see a bright side to it. The ancestor of Genghis Khan, Babur, Zahruddin Muhammad Babur, who was the founder of Mughal Empire in 1426, and then his grandson Akbar brought the Mughal Empire to its zenith. Okay. And then later on to Shah Jahan, who built the Taj Mahal, dedicated to Mumtaz Mahal. And then we have Aurangzeb Alamgir. Then after Aurangzeb Alamgir, it drops again. Okay. And then we have the British East Indian Company, and pretty much that is why Indian is modernized today as well. And so we do have a lot of rich history, and everything is connected. Okay, we can even go back. Okay, I begin this video by discussing the age of Mary, and the fact is that we cannot establish anything concrete based on that one, because we do not have evidence. Okay, but the purpose of bringing up the story of Mary is not to actually discuss the age of Mary, because we basically do not know. Okay, we do not have any extant manuscripts if we use the New Testament, because that is the earlier narrative. And in modern historical methodology, okay, the earlier the sources, the much better. Okay, although we do have to take this into consideration when we look at the text of the New Testament, because the earlier manuscripts doesn't mean that it is the better manuscripts. It could have been copied wrongly, okay, and then that earlier copies could have been copied wrongly again for centuries even. Okay, and then a later manuscripts, okay, could have been copied correctly, okay, or it could have been copied from a great earlier manuscripts which has lesser errors. Okay, again, the study of textual criticism is very complicated. You do need to read Metzger's work and Martin MacDonald's work, Transformation of the Bible, John Barton as well. But John Barton's work is not focused on the text. John Barton's work is focused on the evolution of its narrative. I would say it is more focused on that part, although it contains about textual criticism as well, but not but not a dedicated book for that. But the reason I brought Mary up in the starting of this video, that is to actually show a link, because a link between Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. Okay, Jews today rejected Jesus as the Messiah, but they do not reject Jesus as the historical figure. Even atheists, okay, will not reject Jesus as a historical figure. Even those people who are skeptic, unless you are the ultra-conservative skeptic and the mythicist, you believe that Jesus don't exist. Okay, but we do have tons of evidence that Jesus exists. The Jews do not believe Jesus as the Messiah, but they do not reject Jesus as a historical figure. Okay? So does Islam and Christianity. Okay? According to the Jews, the Orthodox Jews, Jesus was a fake Messiah, because Messiah was supposed to be crucified. That's a paradox. It doesn't exist. A crucified Messiah is just like what Isaiah says. Isaiah, or who I can't remember, that curse who those who hang on a tree. Okay, curse are those who are hanged on a tree or a piece of wood. It can be interpreted that way as well. So according to the Jews, Jesus is a fake Messiah. A Messiah cannot die. A Messiah cannot be crucified. But Muslims do not believe that Jesus was crucified. Okay, God saved him, okay, by raising him up to himself. Okay, and early Christians believed that Jesus, when I say Christians, this is also a very difficult term to use, and incorrect term to use. Early Jews believed that Jesus was the Messiah. And also there are also early Jews who do not believe that Jesus was the Messiah. And this is confirmed in the Quran as well. Now, if you realize that our methodology keeps on changing, it's more fluid in a sense. Okay, but that is because we accept prophecy, at least in this discussion. And before I end, I would actually like to make a remark that it is actually pointless to study religion, okay, or the history of religion, without accepting history. Because by default, if we want to study history, the same way if we want to study mathematics, by default we do have to accept mathematical formulas, even though we couldn't wrap our head around it. Why 4 times 4? Or why 2 plus 2 equals 4? Who invented 2 plus 2 equals 4? Why can't the values of 4 be represented as 3 and vice versa? And so, because these are all human construction. Okay, why must the word 4 be called 4 and not 3, even though the value of it is 4? I hope you're following along here. I didn't want to confuse you. But yeah, so modern reconstruction of history cannot be deemed as superior, and also cannot be deemed as inferior. The fact is that history is always up to interpretation, even though it is bounded by groundings and parameters and premises which we cannot go beyond. Okay, it's just like doing a formula on an Excel sheet. Okay, a formula starts with an equal. If you add a plus, it doesn't trigger the formula. You end a formula with a bracket. If you end a formula with, for example, a space, okay, that will give you an error. Okay, so by default, if you want to study religion, by default you should accept prophecy as one of the parameters. And if you do not accept prophecies as one of the parameters, it is simply as not accepting simultaneous equation when you are trying to learn mathematics. Okay. And simply not accepting the to end a formula with a closed bracket. Yeah, it is pointless, according to just like Imam Al-Ghazali. He made a very great point, and I'll end with this. If you seek knowledge simply just for the sake of seeking knowledge, and knowledge without application, then it is a useless, it's a waste of time. Okay, it is a useless endeavor, and I would encourage all of you listening to this video to actually seek knowledge that you can apply. Okay? Apply knowledge and apply knowledge. That is the more fruitful way, and that is the more you find that once you start applying the knowledge that you have, you gain more knowledge. Even if you have a little bit of knowledge, okay, even if you only know, for example, the different stories on the narrative of Jesus in Matthew and Mark, even if you know that, the more you talk about it, the more you trying to get into exegesis of that pericope, the more knowledge you will get. And so you can spend your entire life reading books, but if you do not apply the knowledge that you gain or attain through those countless hours of reading, then at the end of the day, what use are you to the community? Which is why knowledge for the sake of knowledge without application is useless. Think of it this way: it is just as working. It's just like working in a data entry company. You enter all this data, only for 10 years later for your next colleague to come after you says that, why is he entering all this data? We don't need it. What's the point of keeping all this data? We're not going to use it. So delete. So 10 years of your effort working in that company is useless. It doesn't add. You have failed to add value to the community, even though you have tons and tons of knowledge, even though you have tons and tons of Excel formula in your brain, but you do not teach it, you do not use it. So all those are for nothing. Okay. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me in this video. My name is Arfad, and Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.